Peace and love, YouTube family. Welcome back to the Making African Americans Great Again Indefinite channel. And I'm ready to start my new series. I'll be uploading a video every couple of days. I hadn't really got a set schedule yet because of the way I work. This new series is going to be called Black People, A Nurtured Descent. And what I mean by that is that everything we do, it's an age-old debate in psychology, human nature versus human nurture. For example, I'm a man. It's in my nature to stand up when I urinate. I'm a man. It's in my nature to look at women and find them attractive. However, my nurturing, human nurturing could affect human nature. For example, if I'm a man, what if I grew up around nothing but women, and every time I had to urinate, they taught me to squat and urinate? Or if I was raised around a bunch of women, they taught me to find men attractive instead of finding women attractive. That's nurturing. This is what's wrong with the world today. And while I could go on and talk about the LGBT community, I could go on to talk about racist. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Today I want to focus on black people, my people, and why I call it a nurtured descent. You see, it was a time in the original history of us as black people. It's a time where we were all spiritual and peaceful. We minded our own business. We didn't really go to war with one another. That's not to say that war and violence didn't happen, but on average, we didn't do that. It started off in Kemet. And while I don't have time to break down geographical locations, it's safe to say that that was an original part of Egypt where it all started. You hear a lot of black people running around talking about king, queen, or king and queen, whatever. It was a time where black people were royalty. And we carried ourselves as such. And not only did we carry ourselves that way, but we respected each other as such. And you can go to all parts, Akebulon, which would eventually be called Africa. You can go to all parts and you'll see where in the original histories of the countries, black people carried themselves with a lot of pride, a lot of spirituality. We didn't take advantage of things. We didn't suffer from greed or jealousy or envy. You know, we were real loving people. We loved each other. And then we get to if you ever read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, it tells you that Thoth advised the black people of ancient Egypt and Kemet not to share the secrets, and the secret of knowledge with white people. He told you not to share the knowledge with the foreigners, because if you do, they take the knowledge and use it against you. Lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Us being a spiritual people, us being a kind people, when we laid eyes upon settlers that didn't look like us, we figured that we could share culture, share knowledge, share history. When they started to learn our history and they started to learn how to use alchemy, they decided that they'd be better off, because to the very core, white people have always been greedy. They decided that what they would do is take our knowledge, conceal that knowledge, burn up all the libraries, and start to enslave us. And that's exactly what happened. You can argue with me up and down all day long about how originally blacks sold other blacks into slavery. I'm not disputing that. There's probably some truth to it. However, there's a hidden truth that you won't find in American history books, because that's his story. American history is the story of the white man. It's the story that he wanted you to learn. So he'll never tell you how originally all the arts, the elements, black people had originally found a way to master that in Kemet. Early Ethiopians, all these people found a way to master things. White people have always valued livestock and gold and riches. Like I say, they're greedy people. Greed leads to what? Lust, envy, murderous intent. They've always displayed this throughout the history of their world. They've always displayed this. So let's talk about black people when we start to go against our nature. The North Atlantic slave trade saw a lot of black settlers, a lot of black slaves being brought to America, particularly Jamestown, Virginia, around the year 1695. Once those blacks got here, you had the first generation of blacks, the first generation oppressed, okay? That's in 1695. So let's say, to be fair, let's round it off to 1700. Around 1700, the first generation of oppressed Africans were brought here to America. Here, they had to be stripped of their language. They had to be stripped of their religion. They had to do this to them to break them, to keep them from being able to communicate. So, around 50 years later, you get the second generation oppressed. Okay? First generation oppressed was they broke up families, sold your wife or sold your children to somebody else. You never saw them again. And they forced you to take on another wife. They forced you to have a new family. Okay? They beat them. They hung them from trees. All types of cruel torture was made to be done to them. But one of the main things they did is they re-educated them. They took their religion and they took their language and they gave them a bastardized version of English. And this is why a lot of blacks in those days, and even now, speak in Ebonics. It's just passed on from generation to generation. So that was taken from them. To keep their children alive, to keep their children from being sold into slavery, what do you think happened to the second generation oppressed? The first generation oppressed taught them that the white man's Bible and the white man's God is their God. This is how you get the interjection of a white Jesus with blue eyes and a thick beard and long brown hair. This is how they strayed away from what Revelations tell you is he had feet like burnt brass and hair like wool and fiery red brown eyes. They strayed away from that. And they taught you to praise a blue-eyed white Jesus. And that's going to be important later on. You know, we're not going to elaborate on that now, but later on it's going to be important. So the second generation oppressed, they got taught religion in as a matter of factly speaking tone. A lot of them even became pastors to keep spreading the word. And of course they couldn't learn to read. They couldn't learn to write. They would be killed if they did that. That's second generation oppressed. Third generation oppressed African Americans, because now that's what we are. We are African Americans at this state. Third generation oppressed experienced the Willie Lynch syndrome. This is where, to break them and keep them from being so defiant, during this time, it was a lot of interracial rape. Slave masters would rape some of the slave girls. And you had some of the white slave owners' wives would make the black male slaves fuck them. And they would end up procreating and looking at the children as abominations. Of course you love your child. And whether it's procreated with a person of another race or not, a lot of people find it hard to just abandon their children. So what these slave masters and mastresses would do, they would dispatch the child off to another slave. However, that child being born with a lot of complexion got a lot of treatment. They got a lot of luxuries that the darker slaves didn't get. So the 100% African American dark slaves got treated very poorly. The lighter skinned ones, well, hey, they got treated with a little more favor. Favoritism was shown. I'm not going to dispute the Willie Lynch letter. There's so many people out there that go up and try to say that the Willie Lynch letter is a hoax or that it's made up. Maybe it was, but you know what remains? Fact remains that black people treat each other like we have Willie Lynch syndrome. This is where you get the light skin versus dark skin. I'm going to cover that later on. So here it is. The third generation oppressed have a lot of light-skinned black people from interracial rape or interracial relationships. Some of those light skins go on to marry black, and they still end up with a child of fair skin. This is how it all started to mix. Around the time the third generation oppressed was coming to an end, slavery was coming to an end. This would make it around, slavery was coming to an end. This was making it around the 1850s, closer to the 1900s, and believe it or not, it was still slavery going on in some areas, even after the Civil War and slavery was declared over. So you can dispute me on it all you want. I'm not going to argue with you about it. But around the time slavery was starting to come to an end, this is the end of the third generation oppressed, and we give birth to the fourth generation oppressed. Fourth generation oppressed African Americans were born into the Reconstructive period of America, where whites had to go out and get jobs now because slavery was outlawed. They had to go out and get jobs, and they had to learn some type of trade. Well, up until this point, they didn't have to do any work. So guess who had all the trades? You guessed it, blacks. So with the fourth generation oppressed African Americans, a lot of them were forced out of work, or if they did get a chance to work, they were treated poorly and paid just as poor. And it prompted a lot of them to walk off and start their own businesses. It prompted a lot of them to go off and become independent, devoid of white people, and that's what a lot of them did. A lot of fourth generation oppressed went off and did their own thing. Now, however, this is a time where just walking down the street, they could be killed. Somebody white said you spoke to them or looked at them wrong, you could be killed. So fourth generation oppressed saw a level of violence like no other. And when they established their own businesses, and you hear me talk about Black Wall Street a lot on here, Black Wall Street was a direct result of fourth generation oppressed people saying, hey, look, they don't want to give us jobs, they don't want to give us opportunity, we'll create our own. Well, they were terrorized so much for doing that when they gave birth to the fifth generation oppressed, we was already born into a state where we felt like we're at the bottom of the barrel, we don't deserve anything. But see, whites were destroying blacks all over America, and they realized if we don't let them join society, if we keep them segregated, they'll eventually start an empire so big right here in America, and they'll be so independent right here in America to where they'll give us a run for our money, maybe even overthrow us. So what did they do? They decided, hey, we're going to turn down all your buildings. We're going to stop hanging you from trees so much. We're still going to hang you, but not as much. And we're going to let you join white society. We're going to terrorize your neighborhoods at least 4 times a week. And we're going to beat the hell out of you for nothing. But hey, you still get to eat white-only pies, okay? Blacks fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Brings us to the fifth generation oppressed. When you can walk down the street and see a mob literally beat your next door neighbor to death simply because he walked on the wrong side of the road, what does that do to you? It strikes a level of fear into you that you can't even begin to fathom or understand. So you angry. You walk around with this rage all the time. And they got the system rigged. They control the jobs. Chances of you getting one, slim to none. A lot of fifth generation oppressed said, hey, look, if I can't get a good job, can't start my own business because they tax me so much, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get into crime. I'm going to get into selling drugs or whatever. And that's what happened. They built a lot of projects like the Cabrini Green projects in Chicago and all over the United States in every major city. They built these projects that was supposed to be for middle class African Americans, but let's be honest, most African Americans weren't middle class, they were poor. And when you get a lot of poor people in one area fighting for the scraps at the bottom of the barrel, eventually The need for survival takes an ugly turn. That kid who grew up watching his mother be a prostitute and get beat by different guys or gangbanged by different guys, that kid grows up to become a vicious creature himself. He's never shown any love, so he don't have love to give. He don't have a problem being vicious, and those were the ones who ended up taking control of the projects. Now, to fend this off, a lot of blacks in the community started gangs, which were originally community lookout groups. But if you started one on your block, and I was from another block, and eventually because somebody on my block beat you up 3 weeks ago, you thought I had something to do with that. Being from that block, you beat me. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to start me a little crew to keep myself protected when I'm in your area. And this is how gangs started taking off like wildfire. By the way, no organization. Blacks were not organized at all, because when you poor and you greedy and all you want to do is survive,